up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the Wolverine Live Recruiting Show. I am your host, EJ Holland. Alongside me is my co-host, Zach Libby, and we are here to talk about the latest in Michigan recruiting. Before we do that, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. We're consistently dropping new videos, so get notifications every time we do by liking the video, subscribing to our YouTube channel. That's completely free. Now, if you want even more Michigan recruiting information aside from what you get on this podcast, you can head over to thewolverine.com and subscribe today for just $1 for 2 months using the promo code UM1. Now, all these other offers have kind of disappeared from the interweb, so this is exclusively for our YouTube listeners or podcast listeners, I suppose. But use that promo code UM1. It could go away soon as well, so make sure to take advantage. Use that promo code UM1, $1 for 2 months. All right, Zach, how's it going tonight?
I've had a really weird day. And without getting too much into it, I had a bench warrant for my arrest in Arizona today. And
so you're wanted in Arizona.
I was for 4 hours, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it's a, what do you call it? Like an error on the other people's end. But still, when you get a letter, it says pay this now or get an arrest warrant.
Okay. Well, I guess you went too crazy that bachelor's party you went to in the spring.
Speeding ticket. I do not do any things like that now.
120 and a 30. That's what Zach was doing. I also had a weird day. So as you guys can see, I am wearing a Donovan Edwards jersey. And I went to the grocery store literally 20 minutes ago, and I got to the checkout line, and the guy just looks down. And I was like, I'm not a talkative person aside from me having to do my actual job. But in real life, I don't want to interact with anybody. But I feel I'm still from Texas. I feel like it's common courtesy to just say, "What's up, man?" to the local cashier. So I was like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" And he was like, his response was, "Are these russet potatoes?" And I was like, "Yes." And he was like, I just don't really want to talk to you, man, because you're wearing that jersey. And I was like, oh, sorry. And he was like, I'm an Ohio State fan and you guys are cheaters. And I was like, oh, not this. I definitely did not want to say, you know who my coworker is, Chris Ballard.
Yeah,
So I was like, yeah, it's all right, man. He's like, you're lucky you got one.
If only he knew who we're associated with.
And I was like, all right, just give me my potatoes. All right. So anyway, let's get into the recruiting news. 2 massive decisions coming up this week. 2 Texas guys in DJ Sanders and Jaden Sanders, not related at all, but they are both from Texas. They both are key targets for the Wolverines. Let's go ahead and start off with DJ Sanders. So, this one is a really interesting one. DJ Sanders, as you guys should know, doesn't do a whole lot of interviews or anything like that. He's very, very quiet. He's had a top 3 for a long time of Michigan, Texas, and Texas A&M. Now, going into the summer, Texas A&M was considered the favorite in this recruitment, and then they kind of faded away. Then Texas was considered the favorite in this recruitment, which some people still think they are going into his decision this week. But it seems to have opened up a little bit more. Texas A&M has reemerged as a contender here. Obviously, A&M has plenty to sell when it comes to NIL. Belleville, Texas is kind of in a bit of a rural part of the state outside of Houston. It's more Texas A&M favorable. So there's definitely some Aggie influence out there. And then there's Michigan, kind of the dark horse, the team that people have kind of dismissed in this recruitment. but has continued to hang around. Now, yesterday, DJ Sanders, set the commitment date for Thursday. So we are just 2 days away from August 8th, his commitment date. He has not informed any coaching staffs of his decision. But yesterday, he set his commitment date, and naturally, I'm thinking it's going to be Texas. Again, a lot of people kind of consider them the leaders going into the decision. So I sent out a text and I was like, hey, DJ Sanders, to a source close to the Michigan program. And I was kind of surprised by the response. Michigan thinks they are right in this recruitment. And it kind of makes sense. Texas just flipped a kid from Oregon who's a similar type of player. Texas A&M already has a 300-pound defensive line commit. And plus, they've been so hot and cold in this recruitment as of late. Michigan has a need, like a real need for a guy like DJ Sanders. Yes, they landed David Palepale and Owen Wafel last cycle, but both of those guys are, sub 6'3". Palepale is 6'2", Owen Wafel is 6'2". So with DJ Sanders, he kind of fits more of the Kenneth Grant type of mold. He's a longer kid. He had a really impressive wingspan on his OV. He measured in at 325. So the other thing about Michigan is they haven't recruited any other guys. Like the focus they have defensive line commits, but when it comes to a nose, when it comes to finding a Kenneth Grant replacement, DJ Sanders has been the guy. I kind of likened it to Steve Kasula and Andrew Olesh. He kind of made Olesh that one top priority. He had a few other options kind of on the back burner, but Olesh was the guy at tight end. Obviously, that worked out with Kasula. Esposito is kind of taking a similar approach with DJ Sanders. He'll move on to some other guys if they miss, and he has them on the back burner. He's not dumb. He has other options. But Sanders has been the guy. They're not moving on other targets they weren't going to move on other targets until they felt really good or really bad about DJ Sanders. So, right now they still have some optimism from talking to sources close to the program. I believe it. You guys know me. I'm pretty reasonable. I'm not a guy that's like, oh yeah, Michigan's getting everybody, or I'll tell you the truth if I think, the kid's going elsewhere. And look, I'm not saying Michigan leads, but I think they have a true chance with DJ Sanders. I really do. I mean, he's one of those quiet kids that it wouldn't surprise me if he makes a surprising decision. Like he's just one of those kids that doesn't talk a whole lot. He's out in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Like he could just say, hey, I want to get out of here. The other thing about DJ Sanders is his uncle actually lives in Detroit, so he has family out there as well. His cousin, Emmanuel Sanders, got out of Belleville, Texas, played in the NFL in various different cities. He was actually a senior at SMU when I was a freshman. So I know the Sanders family a little bit. And, I think he's seen Emmanuel, he's seen his uncle kind of leave and have success, whether it's with football or away from football. And that opens his eyes too. So I really do think the need, the fit, having a family connection in the area that can ease the distance aspect, it makes sense. And all you have to do is turn on the tape and be like, here's Kenneth Grant. This is you. There's no other pitch you really need to make there. So that's kind of where I stand on DJ Sanders. So I guess, I've been handling a lot of the DJ Sanders recruitment. But Zach, I guess I'll pose the question to you. How would you feel about Esposito's first class if he pulls a rabbit out of his hat and he's able to land DJ Sanders along with the guys he already has committed?
I mean, when you add landing Nate Marshall on the spring game visit, adding Jalen Williams on his OV, keeping Bobby Kenka in the fold, and now if you potentially add DJ Sanders, I mean, Lou Esposito would probably earn contention status for Big Ten Recruiter of the Year. I mean, let's just forget about DJ, right? Like Nate Marshall is the highest ranked recruit commit for Michigan on the On3 industry ranking. Esposito did a phenomenal job in getting Michigan back in the picture for Jalen Williams after things were not looking as bright as it used to be under the old coaching staff, and that turned around fast. And then keeping Bobby Kanka in the fold, who is a 4-star and a top 5 in-state player in his own right. And then you get potentially the number 6 overall defensive tackle in the country. So that overall, those 4, I mean, that's you are in contention, right, for that award, that top recruiter of the year award for the Big Ten, probably even nationally for all position groups. I mean, if you're looking at Michigan's like assistant coaches and what they've done this offseason, I mean, Lamar Morgan, Lou Esposito, Tony Alford. I mean, all these guys have kind of a case, right? Every single coach, I think, has kind of a case for that award. But again, I think if you land DJ Sanders, I think you have a really solid chance at getting that, because that overall haul is just so impressive.
Definitely. So DJ Sanders, not the only Sanders set to make a decision this week. Jaden Sanders, on 300 cornerback out of Kilgore, Texas, another small town Texas kid. It's kind of not funny for Michigan fans, but funny for me today. So Michigan went out to East Texas a few cycles ago, and Zach, I don't think you were on the Michigan beat yet. And they were favored to land a kid named Jeremy Patton, who's from the same area as Jaden Sanders. And Jeremy Patton almost committed to Michigan, but then he woke up the day before his decision date, and said that God spoke to him and said he needed to go to Baylor. And so he ended up going to Baylor. And so it was kind of funny because I was thinking about it today, and I'm like, man, what if Baylor just comes out of nowhere in this recruitment? Baylor hasn't really been mentioned very much at all. It's been Michigan with Oklahoma State kind of hanging in there. And now it seems like Baylor's making a little bit of a move. Now, we all know that Baylor wears very fun T-shirts that say they pay players. So we saw them kind of come out of nowhere in the Taz Williams recruitment, right? And I don't think that Baylor does have some type of magical deal with God. But I do think they'll dance with the devil a little bit and play around with some cash. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on Baylor here late. Oklahoma State is interesting because they were the first school to offer. I think with Jaden Sanders, Michigan has checked every box. I put in a prediction for him after his UV in June and or going into his barbecue visit here in July. I think Michigan has done everything right in this recruitment. They have an obvious need at cornerback this cycle. Much like DJ Sanders, Lamar Morgan's really focused on Jaden Sanders as the guy at corner. I actually talked to Jaden's mom, Whitney Clark, the other day, and she told me the biggest pitch from Lamar Morgan and Jerome Moore was fit and need, which, the need aspect is very, very obvious. Like I said, they're not really recruiting a lot of other corners. They are working on some flip targets behind the scenes, but Jaden Sanders has mostly been the guy for the last couple of months. So the need is definitely real. Fit, yeah, definitely has that type of personality, relates really well to Lamar Morgan, and play style fit as well. I mean, he's that taller, longer corner that usually excels in the Big Ten. So, I think, again, Michigan's checked every box. They've done everything possible to recruit him. Jerome Moore went all in during the barbecue at the Big House. Lamar Morgan's quickly established that relationship. There's Texas ties on this staff, with Lamar Morgan being from Texas. J.B. Brown, Michigan special teams coordinator, is also from Texas and was actually the first on the Michigan staff to evaluate and offer Sanders. So that relationship is super strong. So if Michigan can just get over the distance factor and some of these pushes from the more regional schools in Baylor and Oklahoma State, and look, then I think they'll land Sanders. But look, Michigan is the far superior program. I mean, Baylor, get out of here. Oklahoma State, get out of here. These are mid-tier Power 4 teams. Like, Sanders has said that development is the biggest factor for him, you easily point at Will Johnson. Kind of like I said with DJ Sanders, you easily point at Kenneth Grant. You want to be like Kenneth Grant. You want to be like Will Johnson. You want to be developed. You want to go to the NFL. You want to play on the biggest stage. You go to Michigan. I mean, Baylor, Oklahoma State again. Get out of here. Like I don't see how you can turn down an opportunity to play at Michigan, to play at one of those schools, unless being close to home is really that big of a factor for you, or unless you buy into Baylor's devilish tactics. So, going into this decision, I feel good about DJ Sanders in Michigan. I think Michigan's done enough, but it is a situation we're still monitoring because we are 4 days from a decision date. And surprisingly, Sanders has not informed staffs. So, Zach, I guess I'll pass it to you. How critical is it for Michigan to land Sanders? And if they don't land Sanders, what would you like to see them do at corner? And even if they do land Sanders, they're going to need another guy. Who would you like to see paired with Sanders? So I guess, broad range of questions, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to land a kid that you are comfortably in the lead for, right? I mean, as you mentioned, development is key. Michigan has that. You talked to his mother yesterday. That was posted on the Wolverine. She mentioned a bunch of factors like education and a coaching staff that develops him into an NFL player. I mean, Michigan's got all of the resources needed to land a kid like Jaden Sanders, who lives in Texas. And to be honest, like a flight from Texas to Michigan isn't, first of all, it's not expensive. Second of all, it's not that long. So I always think like distance never really is a factor for Texas, is just because of how easily available it is for them to fly out to Ann Arbor or to DTW. But if Michigan loses out on this, I mean, I think the first guys that come to mind are those Texas A&M commits that Lamar Morgan offered during the spring evaluation period earlier this offseason. I mean, you're looking at guys like Jamar Beal Goings, out of Goodyear, Arizona, Dejon Petaway out of Katy, Texas. I mean, there's about 4, I think, 3 or 4 that Michigan is really pressing for behind the scenes, I think, really making a push. If they're able to get them on a visit potentially in the season, I would like to see that, whether Jaden Sanders commits or not. I think continuing to go after top talent from, areas like California, Arizona, and Texas, where A&M has their defensive back commits located, I think that would be something that, could really move the needle moving forward.
Yeah, and just to make it clear, whether they land Sanders or not, they are going to look at some other options at corner. I think some names to know: Rutgers commit Caleb Singleton received an official offer from Michigan. Donovan Starr, who's committed to Auburn, also received an official offer. Adonis Curry, who's committed to Texas A&M, is definitely another name to know. But right now, they're full steam ahead. I texted with a source this week about the Jaden Sanders recruitment and about other corner options. And really what Sanders decides this weekend will determine which direction they go in for the other corner spot or corner spots. If they don't land Sanders, do they want a faster guy with verified times to complement a guy like Jaden Sanders? If they miss on Sanders, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board for another taller guy and find a speed guy as well. So just some moving parts there. But right now, the full focus is on closing with Jaden Sanders, and Sharon Moore and Lamar Morgan are doing everything they can to definitely make that happen. All right, guys, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. Michigan has lost a commitment from 3-star wide receiver Phillip Wright. And not really a surprise if you've been following the storyline. LSU started making a late run for Wright right before he gave Michigan a commitment. They really turned up the heat on him after he committed and then hosted him for their Bayou Splash. Zach, what was your initial reaction to Wright decommitting from Michigan?
I'm not a surprise, especially after LSU's track and field team offered Wright a scholarship, and considering his elite speed on the football field and on the track, it's assumed that he's going to dual sport in college. So having the opportunity to stay at home to play football and track, I think, is just too much to pass up. I was not really confident in Michigan keeping him when they got him. I thought it was going to be down to the wire, down to National Signing Day, but he flipped earlier than I expected. So overall, not really surprised.
Yeah, I am not surprised at all either. Like I said, once LSU really started turning up the heat, it was kind of writing was on the wall type of deal, just because LSU does extremely well at keeping kids in its own backyard, and LSU historically recruits really well at Destrehan. I kind of likened it to modern day in USC. You see some kids leave, but it's kind of a pipeline school for them. So it was not surprising at all to see Wright leave the class. And better right now, if I'm Michigan, I'm happy that Wright decommitted now, as opposed to like dragging this out until signing day and then leaving them without an opportunity to go after others closer to signing day. Like, you get it out of the way now, and you can focus on other wide receivers. So it's going to be tough to replace Wright's speed. Obviously, he's one of the fastest wide receivers in the country. But Michigan's going to look at some other targets. Zach, who would you like to see the Wolverines try to replace Wright with?
I mean, I think the obvious answer is Jerome Myles, who's still on the board right now, top 100 wide receiver, who we'll be talking more in depth about. But some other wide receivers that I think Michigan could be in play for, who are committed elsewhere. I mean, you look at Preston Bowman out of Pickerington North in Central Ohio. He was the one who's visited Michigan multiple times, got offered during the eval period after Ron Bellamy stopped by at the school. He is committed to Kentucky, but he's gotten offers from Ohio State and others since he committed. So it's not like Michigan would be the only one trying to flip him. And, history's told us about Michigan and Kentucky battles, but I think this is a kid that Michigan could be in contention for a possible flip. I mean, I know he really loves Michigan and really loves the atmosphere and the teaching philosophies of Bellamy. So that'd be one to look out for. And then another one, I would say Jamari Bryce out of Cartersville, Georgia. He's committed to Georgia Tech, visited in the spring for a spring camp practice. Another one that was offered earlier in the offseason. Again, just another kid who really, really, really appreciated Ron Bellamy's what he had to say in person, and they were connecting well over the phone early in the offseason. So if those were two, besides Jerome Myles, those were the two that I would imagine Michigan pushes for.
Now, those would be direct slot replacements. Bryce and Bowman would be direct slot replacements for Wright. So here's the deal at receiver. They already have one committed in Jacob Washington, who's a bigger body. They're trending in the right direction for Andrew Marsh. Let's say he jumps in the class. So there's two commits. They're looking to take a third, which is a true replacement for Wright. So they want another slot guy. So that would be the third receiver. Now, they would absolutely make room for a fourth if his name is Jerome Myles. But Jerome Myles is another big body guy, 6'3", 215 pounds. So they take Jerome Myles, Andrew Marsh, and Jacob Washington in a heartbeat, but they still want to find a true replacement for Wright. So just to make that clear, Bryce and Bowman would be names to know for that Wright replacement spot. Another name I'll throw out there that I really liked early on. He didn't have really the verified times, but he had a really good in-game when I saw him, was Cameron Miller out of New Jersey. He's currently committed to Wisconsin. He's another slot type, doesn't have the straight line speed of Phillip Wright, but a better football player. Like, he had 200 yards receiving, 5 tackles when I saw him live. He was really high on Michigan early on. He made an unofficial visit and then was supposed to make an official visit before the Wolverines focused elsewhere. He's an industry 4-star. Again, he's committed to Wisconsin, but there's a pre-existing relationship there. And like I said, he was really good when I saw him in game. And I really like him as a kid. Like, I think he fits the Michigan mold. So if I were to pick a guy that's committed elsewhere that's a true replacement for Phillip Wright, I'd go with Cam Miller. Like, he might not have the verified times or the measurables or things like that, but he's just a damn good football player. Kind of like Samaj Morgan, like really good on both sides of the ball. Like, he's, again, he's not going to blow you away with testing time or measurables, but he's just really, really good. Outside of that, it'll be interesting to see who Michigan evaluates through their, first 4 games of the senior year are usually pretty important. If they want to find a true replacement for Wright that has kind of verified times, that's flying way under the radar, I would go with LeBron Bond, who's right in my backyard, literally a 5-minute walk to Norfolk Maury. And he is a guy that runs a 10.6 100 meter. He is kind of a 3-star guy, doesn't have a ton of recruiting buzz around him. He's committed to Indiana, so he is willing to leave this part of the country to go up to the Midwest into Big Ten country. But he runs a verified 10.6 in the 100 meter. That's not far off from Phillip Wright. And he's another, just really interesting dynamic slot that's still a bit raw, but the speed is certainly there. So those are some names that I would maybe take a look at. But obviously, we're going to talk about Jerome Myles in a second. Before we do that, I want to make sure that you guys know that this is the Super Chat show. So if you have a question for tonight's show, leave that Super Chat. That money goes directly to our travel budget so we can continue to see top recruits across the country. I was just in Florida. I had a chance to spend some time with Brady Hart and Carter Smith. So if you want us to continue to travel, see a lot of Michigan's commits and targets, make sure to hit that little dollar symbol, get a Super Chat in tonight. And also, this show is sponsored by My Perfect Franchise. Are you a displaced corporate executive or wanting to put your career into your own hands? Or are you an experienced entrepreneur wanting to diversify? Andy Ludicky can help. Andy is a huge college sports fan, franchise veteran, and he's owned multiple franchises and businesses. Using his expertise, he helps others find their American dream through a very thorough consultation and evaluation process. Call Andy, put your life and career in your own hands. Best of all, his services are 100% free to you. So what do you have to lose? Find your perfect franchise at myperfectfranchise.net. You can also call Andy at 404-973-9901. You can go and learn more about the franchise world at myperfectfranchise.net. And you can also set up a Zoom call with him by emailing him at andy@myperfectfranchise.net. Your opportunity is waiting. Don't miss out. Franchises are all the rage. Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, Taco Bell, Chipotle. Who wouldn't want to join the franchise market? Can even get a grocery store like a Fresh Market. There you go. Call Andy Ludicky today. All right, Zach, we talked about Jerome Myles. They'll make room for him no matter what. One of the most intriguing prospects in the entire country. Just released his top 10 this week. That's a pretty large list. Michigan obviously made the cut coming out of the barbecue at the Big House. Where do you see Michigan within that list of 10 schools?
There's a lot of schools on that list that haven't gotten him on visit. And that's important because I know you've reported that this recruitment might go deep into the process, right? So I expect a lot of unofficials and officials to come over the next several weeks once the dead period is lifted. When it comes to Michigan, I mean, it's cautious optimism that, they're in that upper echelon because of the fact that he flew cross country on his own dime on an unofficial visit for the barbecue at the Big House. He got time with Ron Bellamy, connected well with him. Same with Kirk Campbell, who originally, first evaluated him during the eval period. There's like I said, there's confidence that there's going to be a return in season for an official visit, and that's going to be what the deciding factor of whether or not Michigan is in this or not. I think when you look at the other schools like USC and Penn State and Ohio State, LSU, all these schools who have recently offered, I mean, they're going to be pushing for an official visit. Texas A&M got them on campus in June, and I expect the Aggies to try to get Myles down to College Station again. So it's going to be a really interesting recruitment to follow, considering where he might go. But if he ends up at Michigan for an official visit, I feel like there should be talks about Michigan being one of those stronger contenders. And I think my last point, when you talked about DJ Sanders and Jaden Sanders, looking at other guys on the team who made an impact. I mean, you can talk to Jerome Myles as being that difference maker on the at the receiver position for Michigan, that deep outside vertical weapon. So there's a lot that Michigan can pitch, and him being the guy. So I think the how Michigan kind of does in this recruitment, I feel like how, the cliche, put their foot on the gas pedal. I don't feel like that's going to change anytime soon, considering just how well that visit went over the weekend last week.
Yeah, I think it's going to be big to get him in for a fall OV. That'll tell us a lot more about where Michigan stands, if they're a contender or a pretender going into the fall, because there are some NIL hitters on that list, and Utah, as Shadyville 3 pointed out, does a good job of keeping guys in state. We do have a super chat from Michigan Lover, so shout out to Michigan Lover. He says, news on Babalola. Zach, take it away.
Yeah, so there's not a timeline. There's not a set date for his commitment yet, but it's expected to come sooner rather than later. I mean, Steve Wiltfong on the On3 Whip Around recently said it could come this week. Michigan is second on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. Stanford still has the heavy lead. Auburn and Oklahoma are also pushing for him. But, I think, there's definitely increased optimism, I felt like, this summer, especially after that official visit, the third week of June. And then, just pushing, with Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore having that offensive heavy kind of philosophy in that background, having a play on an offensive line that's won 2 Joe Moore in 3 seasons. So, again, I still think, no one has really flipped their predictions yet for Stanford, but Michigan is still around to the point where, if there's going to be a team that wins over Stanford, I do believe it'd be Michigan.
Yeah, I'll add that I still think it's pretty much 50-50. Babalola did do an interview with our On3 nationalist, Chad Simmons, and the quote seemed a little more pro Stanford. Michigan's done everything they've been able to do over the last couple of months to really move the needle with Babalola and tighten up this race. So I still think it's a little bit of a coin flip here. I think it's really been hard for a lot of people to get a true read on Babalola. I mean, obviously the education is extremely important to him, but Michigan's been able to combat that and pitch their own education along with the offensive line development aspect. If you really care about the football side, I think Michigan trumps Stanford by a larger margin on the football side than maybe Stanford trumps Michigan on the education side. You go to Michigan, you can still get an elite education, or top 20, 25 education in the country, and you can get developed by, a school and a head coach specifically that has 2 Joe Moore awards under his belt and a program that has consistently churned out NFL draft picks at the position. Now, I know Stanford had a bit of history there, but I don't think the gap is that close. I mean, I think there's a wider gap there. So I like where Michigan is from that selling point, but it's, will Babalola buy it, or does he care more about the education side? So it's still kind of a toss-up recruitment for me. I'll add also that Michigan's commits have done a really good job of recruiting Babalola and making him feel like part of the class in a sense. Guys like Eli Owens and Carter Smith and Avery Gash have been really recruiting Babalola hard over these last few weeks and making him feel wanted, and again, making him feel like part of the class already. So, I think the pure recruiting aspect definitely favors Michigan as well. But, we'll see how that one kind of plays out. So that was our only super chat tonight. Very quickly, get one in if you want to contribute to our travel budget. If Babalola sides with Michigan, I'm sure Zach will be out there this season. We did have an OT question of the day, and it comes from Tyson Smith, and he says, say you make a ton of dollars with My Perfect franchise, where would you go on vacation? The catch is it can only be in the USA. Well, we know Zach's not allowed in the state of Arizona, so he has to be somewhere else.
It got fixed.
Well, you take it from there, Zach.
That's tough, man. We go to a lot of places for this job to see recruits, and I don't know. I guess spending like a week, I would go back to Tucson, to be honest. I love Tucson.
You're not allowed in Arizona. You're going to get put in jail.
It got fixed. I'm back now. I'm not going to be on.
Why would you pick Tucson? It's like not even as cool as Scottsdale.
No, it's up. Scottsdale's up there, but if you really want to be in the desert, it's you want to go to Tucson. Scottsdale is like, I don't think I could spend a week in Scottsdale, but Tucson for sure.
We have another super chat from the J White 50, and he says, some come to this podcast for the recruiting news. Me, I come for Zach Livy, who of all places in America selected Tucson. So Zach and I are pretty opposite. Zach loves the sun, and he likes happiness, and he likes bad food and other things of that nature. But me, I like the darkness, and I like being away from people. I don't want to be friends. I don't want to talk to the angry Ohio State guy who's judging my Donovan Edwards jersey. I don't want to talk to anybody, and I want it to be dark. I like for it to be dark, cold, and that's why I miss living in Chicago, and I hate living in Norfolk. Because it puts
You're going to Alaska, aren't you?
I'm going to Alaska. I'm going to Alaska because it's one of the places we don't get to travel as recruiting reporters. I've been to almost every state in the entire country, from Florida to California, but I've never been to Alaska. It's dark, it's cold, and people can leave me alone. And I can enjoy the wilderness and, maybe see some cool animals. So, I wish David Poly would have just stayed in Alaska, because then I could have gone to see him as a recruit instead of going to Farmville, Pennsylvania. But anyway, that is our show tonight. I will be back to answer more questions tomorrow on our weekly Q&A show. I will also be on the road tomorrow seeing a big time target. So if you want more recruiting intel on that, head over to thewolverine.com. Use the promo code UM1. It's $1 for 2 months over at thewolverine.com. Get exclusive insider recruiting information, especially this week as we head into 2 big decisions with DJ Sanders and Jaden Sanders. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. Zach, we'll see you next week, and I will see you guys tomorrow.